Americans, by and large, left, right, and middle, are going, hey, man, whatever you want. I'm like, well, I don't think it's a good idea, but hey, I don't know. So that's basically live and let live is the American philosophy. But these extremists are, no, I live and you accept it as the new reality. I think America's heading to, you talk about a civil war. I don't think it's going to become a civil war. I think it's going to become a states' rights versus federal government. I think you're going to see regional relocation. It's already starting. People are going to start to migrate towards territory where their culture is allowed to exist. This is what happens in Hungary. This is what happened in Poland. Basically, only their whole nation, thank God, was coherent and decided to say, oh no, we're not Germany. Oh no, we're not France. We're Hungary. And they put up borders so that they blocked off, oh yes, the forced Muslim immigration of their culture by Angela Merkel's, generosity, bringing people over into Europe and then sending them to, Hungary. And Viktor Orban is despised for this. You guys got to get these stories and these names down because he created what the Bible calls a sheep state. There's sheep states and goat states, sheep nations and goat nations. And Jesus comes back. There's two kinds of countries. Those that are hostile to and persecuting his teaching and his people, and those that actually do not persecute his people. So it really comes down to freedom of speech and freedom of religion is going to define states, and it's going to define America. I had this epiphany today when I was listening to the latest information about another 190,000 apprehended coming across the border, which means there's 1 million coming across the border. Our border is being invaded by foreign armies right now. And ding-a-ling, bumble-brained Biden is off there doing whatever he does, fumbling around his, trying to recall what he's talking about, doing a Virginia rally for McAuliffe to get in the election up there. Nobody's doing anything. Republicans, senators, Congress, they just don't care. It's not a priority to them. It never was. Or when Trump was in office, they would have done something about it. It should make you mad. And that's the populist movement right there. Because they got 1 million people invading our borders. But I realized something. My epiphany was this. A proverb of Solomon. A man without self-control is like a city without walls, whose destiny is to be broken into and plundered. See, what we did in Afghanistan shows that we have no power to assert our will in the world because God is no longer fighting with our armies. It's a sober thought, people. That the moment we waved our State Department's woke flag on the embassy in Kabul, we were saying America is all about the LGBTQ transgender agenda. And we flew and we linked together two incompatible things, the American flag and the rainbow leftist progressive Marxist agenda. And the moment we did that, we started exporting a theology and an ideology that is incompatible with the founding of the nation and incompatible with the blessing of the God who raised up this great nation. And that's why we got our butts kicked by primitive Taliban soldiers who are stuck in the 7th century. And because they don't have the weapons, we gave them $90 billion of our most advanced weapons. It was a singular judgment of God. There's no way you could say it. It's an act of history that's astounding. And we just kind of shrug our shoulders and go about our business. You know why? Because the terrorists didn't come into our borders yet and manifest, but they're here. They're bleeding through the borders all the time because we have an open back door. My point is, a city is plundered and broken into like a man who has no self-control. America doesn't have self-control, doesn't have sexual control. That's why you've got all these crazy, eccentric groups mobilizing for the right to do this, right to do that, and the demand that you acknowledge their right and convert to it. It's like, this is like biblical Sodom and Gomorrah when it was not just homosexuality, it was militant homosexuality. Big difference. There are many homosexuals you could exist with and be friends with and acknowledge and coexist with. But the militant homosexual doesn't allow you the freedom to exist. Every now and then they pop out, like the choir in San Francisco that's singing about how we're coming for your children. And that was like a premature, out-of-the-box expression of the agenda. And they were like, hey, shut up, get back in the box. They're not ready for that yet, but they're thinking. There's a radical element. They're not willing to let you exist and coexist. They demand your forced conversion. You understand this? They demand your forced conversion. That's why I realized that the collapsing of America's southern border is the proof that we no longer have the ability to assert ourselves as a nation state. We can't do it abroad. We can't even do it domestically. Our boundaries are breaking down. Our boundaries culturally, our boundaries morally, our boundaries physically are collapsing. Now that gives me hope, because I began to realize that Florida and Texas and certain states represent regions of the United States where the people themselves can determine to live. And by the way, Article 10 in the Constitution gives the states rights over the federal government. This was put to the test, I know, in the Civil War. And in that great contest, we had the strange reversal where the federal government's on the side of righteousness and the states are on the side of rebellion. And now we've got the reversal of history again. It's the other way around. The federal government is the persecuting purveyors and projectors of perverse culture. And they are enforcing their agenda on the states that are actually just simply wanting to walk with God and live in peace with each other.
Hey, if you haven't seen me around as much on the platform recently, it's because all the explosive, incendiary things that I want to say, the Lance Rants, are on the podcast. Go to lancewalnut.com/podcast and hear the unbridled utterance